Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful day so far. I got a good one for you today. Our favorite finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, is back in Ottawa, and she's at a forum doing some announcements on some secondary suites. And she took some interesting questions that have nothing to do with homes, but are pretty fun to watch. So just quickly, if you like these videos, please leave a like and subscribe. Now, with no further ado, let's get into it.
Government has been trying to pass its capital gains Ways and Means motion, and it needs to pass this before it, or it wants to pass this before it introduces legislation. It's been delayed because of the privilege motions in the House, or the privilege debates. Are you getting worried that you may not have time to pass this capital gains legislation? There's obviously a ticking clock on this Parliament. Are you worried you're going to run out of time? And if so, what do you intend to do about that?
No, I'm not. I have confidence that at the end of the day, all of us who have the huge privilege of serving Canadians in Parliament need to and will recognize that our job when we come to Parliament is to work for Canada and Canadians. And that means not wasting precious parliamentary time with dilatory motions. It means having real debates about real issues and then getting down to a vote. And on the legislation you mentioned, we had a vote.
So apparently the SDTC scandal and I mean the Liberals funneling $400 million into agencies and into businesses that they either co-own, own, or have friends with. Figuring that stuff out and sending documents to the RCMP is frivolous and is quote unquote playing games, according to Chrystia Freeland. Me personally, as a tax-paying Canadian, I think it's more serious than anything else. But what do I know? I'm just a guy who reads the news on the internet and then rants about it on the internet.
In June, there was a clear majority of MPs elected by Canadians in support of that measure, and I'm confident that we will be able to proceed. I really think, I think Canadians do not like their parliament being made into a spectacle. I think Canadians do not like Parliament behaving in a way that, as a mother, I would consider totally unacceptable if my kids told me that was happening in the playground or the gym at school. It's not okay. We have serious disagreements in Parliament, and everyone here is prepared to debate the issues seriously and reasonably. And I am prepared, I think reasonable people can disagree with the specific policies we put forward, and I am happy, and all of us are happy to debate them on the merits of each of our policies. But
the problem is you don't debate them. Either you get asked the questions by whatever party, whether it be the NDP or the NDP or the Conservatives, and then you say how bad the Conservatives are. I mean, of course, the NDP always say how bad the Conservatives and the Liberals are, and then the Liberals say, yes, the NDP is right, that the Conservatives are the worst. You don't actually debate your stance on all of these things. Just saying.
What we're seeing the Conservatives try to do to our House of Commons, turn it into a place where the currency is not real debate. The currency is, nursery school insults and the currency is dilatory emotions, I think that really cheapens our country and cheapens our democracy. And I really have faith that Canadians are not amused, are not impressed by this, and that the majority of working with the majority of parliamentarians, we will succeed in moving past this.
I agree with the Liberals that Canadians are not amused, we're not impressed, and we do not like how this government is working. So, good job, Chrystia Freeland, for recognizing that. Hopefully, you guys pack up your things real quick, and let's move you guys out and move a bunch of conservatives in so they can clean up your mess, and we will not have all of these issues in our parliament. And it's nice to know that she thinks that debating the carbon tax, getting all the evidence for the SDTC scandal is the equivalent to playground kindergarten games. That is what the equivalent is.
I also want to ask you about the economy. You talked this morning about inflation being low and interest rates falling, but the flip side of that is that the labor market is worsening, and it does stand in contrast to the U.S., where they had a big surprise increase in jobs last week. Are you worried about Canada's labor market? Are you worried about where this is heading right now? Because that is the reason why interest rates are falling at the moment, is because the labor market is weakening.
Well, actually, interest rates have come down because the Bank of Canada has taken a decision to move interest rates down. And I will refer you to the Bank of Canada's rationale for lowering rates. But the bank does
Yes, that isn't wrong, Freeland, but he's saying the reason why the Bank of Canada lowered the rates was because of the decrease in jobs. And he's asking you, as the finance minister, are you worried that there's a decrease in jobs? And I can tell you from looking on Indeed that there is not a lot of jobs on there. Just from like a year ago, there is not even half, maybe a quarter of the amount of jobs there was before.
Tend to be very focused on where inflation is in its decisions on interest rates. Look, I think that we have had a lot of very important and very positive macroeconomic news in recent months. Most important has been what has happened with inflation. Inflation has been really painful for Canadians. Every single one of us sitting here has heard about the pain that inflation has caused our constituents. And so the fact that inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for the past 8 months is a really big deal. 2% in August. It is also the case that interest rates rose at a historically fast level and to a high level given recent experience, and that interest rates moved up to a really contractionary place. Notwithstanding the 3 interest rate cuts, interest rates are still, as the bank has said, and as the universal consensus of Canadian economists is, that interest rates remain at a contractionary level. Interest rates are not at neutral. And anyone who speaks to a Canadian family or to a Canadian business will hear from that family and from that business that having interest rates that are still contractionary is having a real impact on Canada and Canadians. I think it's also a truth.
First thing about inflation, you got to remember, and I don't know if Chrystia Freeland knows this or if she doesn't, but the inflation rate has to go into the negatives for prices to go lower because the inflation rates, and I posted a chart about this earlier, inflation rates went as high as 8%. And yes, they did go down, but every year they went by an inflation rate of 3.25, 3%, 2.7. And that's adding one on top of the other. So at peak, we had prices of groceries, then added another 8% onto that, then add another 2% onto that, then add another 3% onto that. So the prices are ever increasing, and our wages have never caught up. I don't know very many people who get a wage increase of, I think it's been around almost 20% over the past 5 years. Let's continue. That was enough ranting about economics and the amount I know about it.
Universally acknowledged, and Brian, you will hear this from every single Canadian economist you talk to, that the structure of the Canadian mortgage market is different from the structure of the U.S. mortgage market. The fact that we tend to have 5-year mortgages rather than 30-year mortgages means that interest rate increases are passed through to regular Canadians much more quickly, and that weighs on the spending capacity of Canadian households, and it also then weighs on the consumption of Canadian households. So Canadian small businesses feel it, and they feel it and have been particularly feeling it when it comes to the capacity of Canadians to consume services. So that's kind of where I see the inflation and interest rate dynamic. Certainly, jobs and incomes are something we watch really, really closely. One of our focuses during COVID was to try to help Canadian businesses preserve as many jobs as possible. We didn't want people out on the streets. We didn't want them to lose their connection to their job. And one of our focuses post the COVID recession has been to help get more jobs back faster. And I'm really glad that we have 1.3 million more jobs in Canada than we had before COVID. And I'm especially glad that for 19 months, wages have been outpacing inflation. But getting back to the start of your question, if your question is, do I still have concerns about the macro environment? For sure. I think it is very important to respect the independence of the Bank of Canada, and I certainly do. But I think your question points to some pressures that the economy is still facing at a time when interest rates are still, meaningfully above their neutral level.
Thank you.
The issue with jobs we have right now, though, is the massive spike of public jobs over private jobs that we have. According to the Financial Post, which the Liberals love to quote so much about jobs, they said in February, and so this is for a while ago, public sector roles rose by 18,800 positions, while the private sector lost 16,400 jobs. Statistics Canada has shown. And that's only in February. Now, unfortunately, I can't find ones from over the summer. That would be even better, but at least I could find those, which is sort of interesting because the Liberals keep posting on Twitter that Financial Post saying that jobs are up, more jobs in Canada in July this year, and yet how many of those are public sector jobs? How many of those jobs are taking money out of the taxpayer's paycheck? And this is something we got to think of when the government talks about wage increases and all of that stuff. We have to look into whether or not these are private sector jobs giving these wage increases or giving these jobs, or whether or not this is the public sector doing it, because that's a totally different thing.
From CTV News. Minister Freeland, the Bloc demand remains the same about the OAS, but your government didn't support their motion last week, and I'm going to put something to you that Minister Duclos said yesterday, which is what the Bloc is proposing is not the right way to proceed because it gives more money to affluent seniors than to low-income seniors. Has your government shut the door completely on this demand?
So as I said, I always agree with Jean-Yves. We actually work very closely together. A collaboration, a partnership that was really forged during COVID in the COVID committee. What I would say about the Bloc is we believe truly in having an open door to cooperation with all parties in Parliament. And we have been having some very productive, very sincere conversations with the Bloc. In fact, Jean-Yves.
According to the leader of the Bloc Québécois, it has not been productive at all. I think you kind of got your wires crossed there. You got to go back to the table and maybe do a little bit more collaborating there.
And our House leader and Steve McKinnon and I had a long conversation last week talking about their proposals, getting an understanding of what were the core issues that were important to them, and putting forward from our own perspective what we think are the core issues that are important for Canadians, for Quebecers. It was a fruitful conversation, and we are very open and keen to continuing that discussion with the Bloc. At the same time, we continue to have very fruitful and productive and constructive conversations with the NDP.
Anyways, we all know what that means. Is they'll try to sort of lower it and dull it down, kind of like they did with the pharmacare plan, where it's pretty much a shell of itself. And we all know that the Bloc Québécois are going to be like, no, that's not what we want. So, and if you're not going to give us exactly what we want, then we're going to go to the opposition parties, because that's what they've been saying this whole time. And vote of no confidence, no one? Or everyone?
I'm in close touch with my counterpart. Many of my colleagues are in close touch with their counterparts as well. And, we're proud of our government's record in passing some historic legislation for Canada and Canadians, working collaboratively with the NDP. Dental care, free contraceptives, free diabetes medication, also the Green Industrial Transformation Investment Tax Credits. These are really, really important measures that are, transforming Canada in a positive way. We did that working collaboratively with the NDP, and we're definitely having conversations with them as well about ways that we can continue to work together.
Thank you.
They're not free, and this is the manipulation she's posing through, is none of this is free. Once this this legislation goes through, we're going to watch our taxes skyrocket through the roof. And if we don't watch our taxes skyrocket through the roof, they're going to rev up the moneymaker in the government, and we're going to see inflation boom again, because that's the only way we can pay for it. They don't even have enough money to pay for the increase for the Social Security. So I don't know how they're going to do. What did they say? The pharmacare plan would cost like $1.2 billion plan or something. So that's what she doesn't tell us. The underlying costs through our taxes of all these programs.
Yeah. Are you bringing up the fact that you're talking with the NDP because you're going to start courting their support again, because you are saying no to the Bloc and you're not going to be meeting this OAS demand?
Not at all. We really take as our starting point what is good for Canada and Canadians. Our starting point is talking to actual Canadians, talking to individual Canadians in our constituencies, talking to people who represent them. I've been having good conversations with union leaders and business leaders. I know my colleagues have as well. And with that as a starting point, we are then really open to looking for partners in this Parliament so that we can get the work of Canada, the work for Canadians done.
Okay, yeah, but the union leaders and the business leaders that you talk to can't just be the ones that you go and have brunch with on the weekend, or that you used to have a business with when you were in college. I mean, you have to actually go out and seek business leaders from different walks of life. Same with Canadians. You have to talk to the farmer who raises his own cattle and butchers his own pigs, or the homesteader who raises his own chickens and lives out in the middle of nowhere using solar panels. Those are the people you got to talk to, but I don't think she has any of those in her constituents. Though those are the people she has to talk to because she's the finance minister of all of Canada, not just her constituents.
Kate. Good morning, Ministers. Kate McKenna from CBC News. Just to follow up on my colleague's question, will your government be presenting a counteroffer to the Bloc this week, one that boosts benefits for seniors but at a lower cost?
As I said, we have a real open door. We have been having constructive and very concrete conversations with both the Bloc and the NDP. I'd be ready to have conversations with the Conservatives if they'd like. Seriously, there are some things that we...
Oh, you have many conversations with the Conservatives. The issue with your conversations with the Conservatives, you seed non-conservative things and leftist things into those conversations. So then the Conservatives have to say no. Now, the NDP, I mean, they really have no power anymore. They gave up their supply and confidence agreement, and not that they should have had a supply and confidence agreement anyways. And it sounds like from your remarks about the Bloc Québécois demands that you're not going to meet them. So if the government's not going to do anything for any of the other parties, why should any party have any confidence in your government? Especially when you can't put any business through because Parliament's not working anymore.
I agree with them on too. And we did work together during COVID with the Conservatives. So, our view is every single person in Parliament is there because Canadians elected them. And every single person in Parliament is there because Canadians elected them to work for them every day in a challenging time for Canada and the world. We have our own very clear view about what our values are and what we need to do for Canadians. And we are open to working constructively and creatively with other members of Parliament to get that done. We recognize that we're in a minority in Parliament, and that means we need to be flexible and creative. But we also recognize that minority parliaments can get a lot done. We have gotten a lot done in a minority position. And historically, minority governments have gotten a lot done. I think, I think everyone is proud of the work that Lester B. Pearson and his government got done in a minority.
And how much longer is the government prepared to see the House tied up with privilege motions, and what options are you considering going forward?
Look, I just think it is appalling and ridiculous what we're seeing in the House of Commons. And I think it is really disrespectful to Canadians and disrespectful to our democracy. We need to step back for a minute and recognize what a big deal it is to have a democracy. How lucky we are as a country to govern ourselves this way. And I'm grateful to the generations of Canadians who've built this incredibly complicated, incredibly wonderful machine of democratic government. I don't take that for granted for a single moment. And so it makes me frustrated, and it
Oh no, you're not taking it for granted. You're taking advantage of it. You're taking advantage of the ethics commissioner having no teeth to deal with any of these ethics scandals that Trudeau's having. You're taking way advantage of the SDTC fund that was put in by I can't remember the prime minister who put it in, but I think it was like might have been Brian Mulroney. Let me know in the comments down below who put it in. But I bet you're thankful for the prime minister who put that in, because you guys got to dig your greedy little fingers into that and give it to the businesses you own. I bet you're also glad that we're a country who really, really cares about the environment and being green, and so you could create a green slush fund that you could use to fund your own companies as well with that, and fund random companies that shouldn't qualify for it. I bet you're very glad for the people who made Canada, and I bet those people who built Canada right now, if they could see the government right now, they'd be rolling in their graves.
It makes me angry to see just the disrespect for constituents, the disrespect for Parliament that the Conservatives are demonstrating.
That's not to say I agree with everything that Chrystia said, but that's not to say that work isn't continuing. I mean, we're continuing to roll out our dental care program. We're continuing to move forward on the disability benefit. We're here today announcing new measures on housing. So there are still ways to get things done. But commenting on your question and perhaps your previous question, I mean, this is not new. This is a pattern. We have a leader of the opposition who is trying to convince Canadians that Canada is broken while simultaneously trying to do things to break it. On Finance Committee, where he was before he was leader, and what has continued since he has become leader, the Conservatives...
How could the leader of the opposition do things to Canada to break it? He doesn't have the power to do that. The only power he has is to call you out on what you've been doing. Can anybody today tell me they're better off right now than they were back when Harper was prime minister in 2014, let's say 2013, 2014, if you can even remember your life back then because you're going through such hard times? Pierre Poilievre is saying Canada's broken because 2 million people are going to food banks now who've never been there before. Young people can't own a house, and the only house they can't own is in the middle of nowhere. And unfortunately, jobs these days are in cities, so you need to be in the middle of somewhere where the price of housing is high to be around your job. And then, don't get me started on the carbon tax increasing every year. And that's just 3 things. And the ethics scandals that have been going on. Need I say more of what is breaking Canada?
have not studied a budget in 3 years. They haven't studied a fall economic statement in 3 years. The role of the opposition is not just to oppose. It's supposed to be to propose solutions and to work for Canadians. That is a role that they have decided to vacate in their present form. And as we saw at the committee level, and as we will see in the House, the majority of parliamentarians are here to get work done and to deliver for our constituents back home. So, I mean, it's easy to say that the Conservatives will remove this dilatory tactic if we do X, Y, or Z, but they're actually looking for dilatory tactics. They're not looking for solutions for Canadians, and that's just the world we're living in with this particular leader and his view on how Canada should be governed.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump in if I may, because we're surely running out of time, and we have 2 more questions in the room and a couple online. So if we could just move ahead and try and keep our questions tight and our answers tight too, Mac.
Hi, Ms. Freeland. Will there be a fall economic statement? Should Canadians expect that there'll be new spending measures in there? So it could be a conference motion. And if you're feeling generous on making some news, just tell us what day it's going to be too. That'd be great as well.
I'm feeling generous, but my generosity does not extend that far. So we are working hard on a fall economic statement. That is one of the things that we're talking about with the NDP and the Bloc. It is certainly something that we're talking about with Canadians. That is work that we started to do really the day after tabling the budget. We've been having a lot of discussions, a lot of conversations across the country with union leaders, with business leaders, with Canadians in all walks of life. And I do just want to emphasize that even as those conversations happen, even as we are frustrated and appalled by the spectacle the Conservatives are making of Parliament, the work of our government continues. And I want to give you guys 2 examples. So, since the House came back into session, Finance has announced, I've announced 2 hugely significant measures which are going to happen no matter what. And that is the 30-year amortizations for insured mortgages for first-time home buyers and for everyone buying a new build, and raising the limit to 1.5. That is transformative in the life.
Wow, that's so great. You can be a debt slave for 30 years of your life and pay even more money to the bankers. If it wasn't bad before, it's certainly bad now. As a government, we're doing such a great job.
Of millions and millions of Canadians, and I know that because I have heard from them. We also have announced, we announced last week, the Canada Carbon Rebate. That is 2.5.
Sorry, I had to stop it right there to say, who is them? Is it the two 19-year-olds who just got out of high school? They don't really know too much about finance, so they're like, yay, being able to pay it off more or for a longer amount of time means I'll be able to buy a house easier, even though it will cost more money. But I don't know that yet because I haven't really had to think about my finances. I mean, I used to be that way too, so that's why I'm assuming that's who she's talking about, because she's definitely not talking the 28-year-old middle-class worker who's gone into credit card debt because he can't pay for food and will never buy a home, or the new homeowner that is stressing out and might have to remortgage their house at a 30-year loan. Definitely not talking to those people. Or, I mean, definitely those people aren't the people who are happy about the 30-year mortgage.
$1 billion going back to Canadian small and medium-sized businesses. In Ontario, it means a business that employs 10 people is going to get $4,000. A business that employs 499 people is going to get $200,000. This is real money for our businesses at a time when they need it. Those are two really, really meaty measures. If I were today presenting a fall economic statement that contained those two measures as our headline measures, I can assure all of you, you'd have a lot to write about and a lot to put on your programs. So we're doing a lot, and we're being thoughtful and creative about the things, about looking at areas where we can move ahead and not be blocked by, playground tactics.
Follow up, Mac?
I can. I think I already showed you guys the chart about the business carbon incentive that was sent out on StatsCan, and yeah, I can tell you for a fact that when you include all the costs for the carbon tax on pretty much everything the business has to buy, it doesn't amount to the same amount that the government gives back to the business or the worker, or per worker. Sorry.
You're mentioning playground tax. I keep hearing these rumors, so I want to put it to you. Is your government considering proroguing Parliament?
No.
Dylan Robertson, go ahead.
Minister Freeland, your government has...
Well, apparently that's put to bed. But we'll see when the Governor General gets here and what Trudeau says, because it's up to Trudeau, really. And yeah, I think, what did I see on True North? I think he just made a video saying that the Governor General is going to be around tomorrow. So we'll see.
There's more to roll out in the FES you just mentioned. What are the factors that you're weighing in constructing the FES to maintain the confidence of the House?
I'll be very basic. Our focus in the FES is going to be the very clear economic plan we laid out in the budget. Our focus is fairness for every generation, and we deliver that by getting more homes built faster, by acting on affordability for Canadians, and by acting to drive economic growth, and doing all of that from a strong fiscal foundation. And listening to the questions all of you have been asking today, you guys also are responding to what you're hearing from Canadians, and I would put all of your questions in that space. You've been asking about housing, you've been asking about growth, you've been asking about affordability. That's, our clear plan and direction. We put in place some important measures in the budget, and we are following through.
Yeah, I don't think there's really fairness for every generation, because your new budget with the increase in capital gains, which I'd like to mention, you didn't mention, but with that increase to anything over $250,000 will be taxed at a rate of 65%, I believe it was, is going to affect every young person, or most young people, who have been waiting for any inheritances they've been waiting for in their whole lives, from their boomer grandparents or their parents. Thanks for that. I love paying more taxes on things.
What are your thoughts on this block motion when you're talking about the budget plan that called for fiscal responsibility, that called for fairness for every generation, not just the wealthiest demographic in Canada?
Look, I think those are really important considerations, and in our meeting with our colleagues from the bloc, we explained that those are concerns our government has. I think when you go into any kind of negotiation, you have to know clearly what your values and your objectives are. But you also have to be open to really listening to the values and objectives of your counterpart. And where there is a true desire to reach a win-win outcome, a creative, flexible, and listening approach can go a long way.
We have one question on the line en français, and I'm hoping you're willing to just take it quickly, and then we can wrap up for the day. So I will unmute my colleague Olivier from TVA. Olivier, à vous.
Oui, bonjour.
Okay, it seems like that's about it for all the questions that the finance minister got today. So I pose this question to you. What do you guys think about how Chrystia Freeland, our favorite finance minister, is doing at the moment? How do you think of Canada's finances, and how do you think we are going to get out of this $1 trillion hole we are in right now? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, leave a like and subscribe. And if you'd like to donate to the channel, I have a Buy Me a Coffee link down below as well. All of that is appreciated. And other than that, have a great day.